So just a couple of more boring messages to start with. The meeting is recorded. This is for the purposes of the teachers being able to share it with their class after today. So it will be shared with all the participants in the campaign. You can type questions at any point or comments into the chat box. We do have a dedicated question and answer session at the end, but if any of your students come up with a question at any point, just please go ahead because we'll line up those questions and then have them ready for the end of the session. Okay, so who have we got with us here today? So we have Gabriel Gaffney. He is a freshwater scientist with the EPA. And as you know, the EPA sponsor the GLOW program. So we're delighted to have him here. And he'll tell us a little bit about what the EPA do in terms of monitoring water quality in Ireland. We will have a student quiz after Gabriel's presentation. And then Ruth Gaj-McKeever, who some of you may recognize, she worked with Untashka for a long time, is joining us from LAWPRO, that's the local authority's waters program. And Ruth will share some of her knowledge around engaging with rivers and how you and your students can get involved in protecting your local river. We'll have another student quiz then, followed by that question and answer panel at the end. So we are delighted to get going. For those of you who don't know, so what is happening? What are we all doing at the moment? So we have our river ecosystem campaign that kicked off just last week with our teacher training. The students that you see here today and the teachers, there's over 70 schools participating in this campaign in Ireland. So we're delighted that there's so much engagement. So what is going to happen? All the schools will receive a kit shortly that contains some equipment that they can use to assess the health of their local river. So what does that mean? So first of all, they'll make a visual assessment of their river, and this will be guided by a river worksheet that they can bring with them along to the river. And just so you know, obviously we're focused on water sampling and testing, but a big component of this is the visual assessment. And we're thinking about the whole river and its surroundings. So they'll be thinking about land cover. So what is the land around the river being used for? They'll also be thinking about habitats and looking for different signs of life and making observations around what they see in this worksheet. And now all of this information will be submitted to GLOBE. So it's a real all-inclusive health assessment. And they'll be trying to work out how healthy their local river is based on the results they get. So as you can tell already, this is a really important citizen science activity, and having, this amount of schools out there looking at our rivers is really fantastic. So we're very grateful to the teachers that are setting aside time and energy to make this happen, because obviously you have to, well, for most people, you have to actually leave the school grounds to test their local river and to assess it. So we're really grateful for the engagement and, the activity around trying to organize that. For this campaign, there are approximately a third of the schools at this point, maybe a little more, are going to do an additional ecological assessment. So that's where they're going to get into the rivers and do a kick sample and have a look at the small invertebrates that are living in the river and to try and understand the health of the river using life as an indicator. So I'm sure we're going to hear more about that today from Ruth and from Gabriel. So stay tuned on that. Okay, so, oops, not that one. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Gabriel. I'm going to stop sharing. And he will talk about the EPA's role in assessing our rivers and tell us a little bit about what he does. Thank you, Gabriel.
Okay, morning, everyone. Can everyone see that now? So my name is Gabriel Gaffney. I'm a scientific officer with the Environmental Protection Agency. And today I'm going to talk to you about how the EPA monitor freshwaters. So
sorry, can everyone see Gabriel's presentation?
No, can't say anything.
No. Sorry, Gabriel, would you mind just stop sharing and resharing?
Yep. Me too. Can you see it now?
Yeah, that's perfect. And just put it into presentation. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thanks a million.
Okay. Yeah, I must have been sharing the other screen. But, okay.
I know, yeah, that actually happened to me earlier. And actually right now we can see your notes. It's probably because it's still connected to the bigger monitor. This happens to me
Okay.
all the time. So I have to disconnect it from the big monitor because I don't get the smaller details of how to share it in presentation mode when I have two monitors. Someone else might know.
Well, I don't really have any notes anyway. Like, is it okay as it is, or don't want to delay too much on this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's,
So
yeah, I think as
you're
long as
seeing
everyone can
this? Are
see
you
it.
seeing this with the mouse? Is it?
Yeah.
Like, okay. Um, Let me stop sharing.
We did practice this before, by the way, everyone, and it was
Yeah.
perfect. This is classic.
All right. I'm going to try this again. I'm going to move it onto the other screen and see. Now, is that
Okay,
better?
that's perfect. Thanks, Imogen. Very much.
Sorry for
Yeah,
all the
thanks.
delay with all that.
No, no problem.
Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, I'm a scientific officer. I work with the Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm based at the Ecological Monitoring and Assessment Unit, and I'm based in Castlebar. And the Ecological Monitoring and Assessment Unit, we have 14 scientific staff, 9 freshwater biologists and 4 marine biologists, and we're responsible for monitoring and assessing and reporting on the ecological health of Ireland's rivers, lakes, estuaries, and coastal waters. So just an overview of what I'm going to talk to you today about. I'm going to talk about why we monitor water quality and talk a bit about the pressures, and then a little bit about the kind of the legislation behind why we do what we do. So the Water Framework Directive. And then I'm going to talk a bit about how we monitor and looking at the different parameters that we're looking at. So we're looking at the physical, chemical analysis and biological analysis. And I'm going to focus my talk really on rivers and invertebrates. So just in terms of the EPA and the Ecological Monitoring and Assessment Unit, we look at the rivers, lakes, estuaries and coastal waters of Ireland. So the rivers and lakes are the freshwater side, and the estuaries and the coastal waters, they're the marine side. And in terms of, I'm a freshwater ecologist, so my area that I of expertise is the rivers and lakes side. So we look at over 2,300 rivers and over 224 lakes. So this slide just kind of shows, um, gives you an idea of what my year looks like. So from January to March, at the start of the site, I'm kind of based in the office, and then we do a bit of field work. Then in April, it's only for a couple of weeks on some rivers and some lakes. Then in May, we're back in the office and we're kind of preparing for the bigger section of field work, and that takes place then between June, July, August, and September. So at the start of June, I normally visit a few rivers, and then between June, July, I'm out doing a lot of lake work. So the lake season really starts on the 15th of June. And then once that's finished, we're back out to rivers, and we're out potentially out sampling rivers until the end of September and sometimes into October. And then the rest of the year, then October, November, December, we're back in the office and we're reporting on the findings that we got from the rivers and the lakes that we were sampling over the summer period. So why do we monitor water quality? Really, we want to know how healthy our rivers are, and we want to understand the impacts that pressures are having on the ecology. So these pressures are things like point source pollution, typically from sewage treatment plants, and diffuse pollution. And I'm going to talk a bit and hopefully explain what they are now in the next couple of slides. And there's other pressures like hydromorphological pressures, and that kind of relates to things like channelization and maybe dredging, and where you've got barriers, so like fish aren't able to get back upstream, and how that impacts on flow patterns. And there's other pressures like sedimentation and increased soil erosion that affects rivers and lakes. So I mentioned point source pollution as its pressure for rivers. And what point source pollution is, typically it's a single pipe that's gone into a river. And typically they're associated with sewage treatment plants. And normally if a sewage treatment plant is working correctly, so you've got all your I suppose the waste from every time you flush your toilet, it all goes down, and it's ideally it goes to a sewage treatment plant where it's treated and it's going back into the river as more or less clean water. But if something goes wrong somewhere, you might get excessive um, flows from the sewage treatment plant, and you get a lot of nutrients entering the water where they shouldn't really be. So that's typically coming from a point source pollution. And that used to be a big problem in the 80s, but it's been fixed a lot more lately, so it's not as much as a problem as it used to be previously. And then on the other side, you've diffuse pollution, and it's kind of harder to identify because it's not a single point, but it's kind of a lot of it's coming in from maybe different fields or different catchment areas getting into the river, and it's typically associated with agriculture and forestry pollution. And this, like as I say, it's associated with agriculture because when a farmer spreads slurry or he spreads fertilizer on fields, sometimes if it's put out at the wrong time, or if there's no boundary between the river and where the fertilizer has been sprayed onto the field, it might get into the water, and this potentially causes nutrient enrichment of the water. And other pressures then that we need to keep an eye on, as I was saying, are changes to hydrology and impacts of soil erosion. And all of these, they have potential impacts on the ecology that are occurring in the rivers and lakes. So it's potentially bad for the ecology. Um, and so in terms of the impacts on the ecology, I was talking about nutrients. So when you've got, like if you get excessive um, stuff coming in from your sewage treatment plant going into the river, or from when the farmer's spreading slurry, they're full of nutrients, and typically they're full of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. And if that gets into the rivers and lakes, it is the potential to lead to a big growth of aquatic weeds and toxic algae. And the problem with that's fine, but when it starts breaking down, when the algae starts breaking down, it starts using up all the oxygen that's available in the water. And there's like your fish and your aquatic invertebrates, they need the oxygen. And if this toxic algae start using up all that oxygen, it has the potential to lead to fish kills and the potential to kill organisms that should be occurring naturally in the water. So there's some legislation to hopefully bring all European water bodies up to good status, and that's called the Water Framework Directive, and that applies to all European countries. And the idea is that all European countries should, all the rivers, lakes, and the coastal areas in all European countries, they should achieve at least good status and hopefully high status. So by good status, I mean that the water quality is good, and high status is the best. So it's like pristine status, and it's really hard to achieve high status. So the Water Framework Directive wants all the water bodies in all your rivers, lakes, and coastal areas in Europe to be at least good status. Um, and then at the other end of the scale, you've got bad status, which is like there's typically nothing occurring in your rivers. It's sludge nearly. And if your water body is at good status, you don't want it to deteriorate. So you want it to stay there. You don't want it to go from good back down to moderate. You want it to stay at good status. So the Water Framework Directive, it uses this kind of makeup to determine whether the rivers and the lakes are as high, good, moderate, poor, or bad status. And it typically uses, if you see I don't know if you're able to see my mouse there, but if you see this box here, it uses the ecological status or potential, and that's made up of the biology and the physical chemical parameters, and sometimes the hydromorphology as well, to determine whether the rivers, lakes, they're at high, good, moderate, poor, bad status. So as I was saying, the ecological status uses the physical chemical status, and it also uses the biological elements. So the biological elements are things that are growing naturally. So your plants and your invertebrates, diatom communities. These are like algae that grow on rocks. So there you see the river there with the aquatic plants. So the physical chemical analysis, and I think you might have the option to do some of this in your work, is looking at the nutrients. As I mentioned earlier, nutrients are a big problem. So you're looking at your orthophosphates, your nitrogen, your ammonia that are going into the rivers and lakes. And it's also looking at the dissolved oxygen. So the dissolved oxygen is the amount of oxygen that's available in the water for life forms. And it's looking at some other things as well. So the physical chemical analysis, looking at some other things like temperature and conductivity and pH. And then on the other side, the biological analysis, that's looking at your bugs that are growing naturally in the rivers and lakes. It's looking at the plants that are growing naturally, and the fish, and the phytobenthus it's like the algae that are growing naturally. And as part of our work as well, we have to keep an eye out for other biological components, such as invasive species, that if they get in, they sometimes take over. So we have to keep an eye out for them, and we have to record if they're occurring. So as part of the EPA monitoring, we look at over 2,300 river sites over a 3-year period. And then we look at 224 lakes, again, over a 3-year period. And just to say that I'm going to focus mainly on the rivers, but just to say the lakes, when we look at the lakes and the biological elements, we're mainly looking at the plants when we're doing our lakes work, whereas the rivers, we're using mainly the invertebrates and the bugs. So the EPA, as I was saying, we look at over 2,300 river sites, and they're all mapped out there in the map of Ireland. And we look at a range of different rivers, so big ones and small ones throughout the country. And when we look at the river sites, the main component we're looking at to determine how the water quality of the rivers is the bugs, so the invertebrates. And we use a system that's called the Q value system. And this is developed based on the known sensitivities of invertebrate groups to different types of pollution. So some bugs are sensitive to pollution and others are able to tolerate it more. So based on this, we're able to split up the invertebrates into how they tolerate pollution. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. So just that table there shows how the Q value is kind of assigned. We've a high status, and that's gives it a Q value of Q5 and Q4-5, and then good is Q4, right down to the bottom there, a Q1, which is bad, and that's seriously polluted. So again, this kind of explains how the Q value works. As I was saying, the high status is a Q5 score, and then at the bottom, the bad status is a Q2 or a Q1 score. And we put the invertebrates, the bugs that are occurring in the river, we put them into different groups. So some are very sensitive to pollution and some are very tolerant to pollution. And there's a fact sheet on this. I sent it around last year. I might send it around again, like the EPA has developed that talks a bit more about the EPA Q value system. So typically when we go out to rivers, we take a kick sample, and some of you guys might be taking kick samples later on in this year as part of your work. And it's a standardized method, so a 2 to 3 minute kick sample. So we stand there and we kick the riverbed substrate, and the water flows through the net, and then some of the bugs that are occurring in the river, they get caught in the net. And then I identify them on site. We identify we take the stuff from the net and we put it in a tray, and we try to identify what bugs are occurring there. So in a good river, you get things like stoneflies and mayflies and caddisflies. So we've a range of the good bugs that you typically might see in a good river. Then at the other end of the scale, you've got like bad, well, they're not really bad invertebrates, but they're more tolerant of pollution. So they're able to withstand pollution better than the other sensitive species. So here we've got a few pictures of some of these bugs that are able to withstand pollution. So in the middle there, this guy is called a rat-tailed maggot, and he's able to withstand very low oxygenated water. So there's, as I was saying, with the nutrients, when it pulls all the oxygen out of the water. So this guy is able to stick his tail up just on the edge into the air, and get the oxygen from the air. So it doesn't matter to him how much oxygen is in the river. And similar, this guy, this chironomid, he's got hemoglobin type thing in his blood, so he's able to withstand very low oxygen conditions. So all these bugs on that picture there, they're tolerant to pollution. They're able to withstand pollution. Whereas these guys to the right, they're more sensitive to pollution. So if there's very low oxygen in the water, they get affected, and if there's very low oxygen, they kind of die off, and you end up with just the bugs that are tolerant to pollution. So in a good river, you should have a good combination of these guys that are sensitive to pollution. And the reason we use bugs really is because they're easy to sample, and they're sensitive to different kind of pollution sources. And different taxa have different sensitivities to pollution, as I was just saying. And there's a lot of them have been identified, so we know they're easy to identify, and there's lots of kind of books that are out there that help you identify them. So it's a well-known and well-used practice. But there is some disadvantages to using them, so it's just to be aware that just because you're using them, it doesn't tell you everything. It doesn't give you the exact timing of the pollution, and it doesn't accurately identify the type of pollution. So it's just to be aware that there is some disadvantages. So while they are very useful, there is some kind of disadvantages to using them too. So these are some pictures of some sites that I've visited, rivers and lakes. And then in terms of the overall water quality in Ireland, we see that the latest kind of survey, we see that there's 56% of our rivers are kind of high or good status, so they're called unpolluted. And then the remainder then, so the 44% are polluted. So that's based on you just using the biological water quality. And I was saying we do a combination of the biological and the physical chemical. So that's going to reduce now when I show you the next couple of slides. And this slide here kind of shows you the type of I suppose the decline. Like if you look back 20 or 30 years ago, if you see the blue element there and the figure 619, we used to have a lot more high status. So the best river quality, we used to have a lot more of them back in the 30 years ago, but they've deteriorated now. So we have a lot fewer. 2019, 2022, we have a lot fewer than what we used to have. And we still have a lot of water bodies that are still kind of poor or moderate or bad condition. But on the flip side, we used to have a lot of bad sites, and they've kind of come back a bit. So we don't have as many sites that are as bad, but we still have a lot of work to do, because if you remember what I was saying about the Water Framework Directive, the idea was to get everything at good or high status. So we need to turn all these yellows and oranges and reds into your greens and blues. We need to bring them all up into our good and high status. So we still have a lot of work to do. So as I was saying, the previous slides were using the biological only, but when you combine all the parameters, so the biological and the physical chemical parameters, so your bugs and your nutrients, that gives you the ecological status. So in terms of the ecological status, Ireland, we've about 50% of our rivers are at good water quality, and the remainder the other 50% are as kind of below good. So they're kind of slightly polluted or polluted. So we need to bring up these moderate, poor, and bad rivers and lakes, well, the rivers essentially, into good or high status. So there's a lot of work to be done yet. And then just to say that our work, the work that we do with the EPA, it's used by a lot of other organizations, so such as LAWPRO, who you're going to hear about, the local authorities water program in a few minutes, and other agencies, so the Department of Environment, the Department of Agriculture, On Tashka, I'm sure use our information as well, and Ishka Éireann when they're planning out sewage treatment works. And there's some other considerations that we need to take account of when we're carrying out our work, and you guys need to do this as well when you're going to be, if you're going to be taking kick samples or going near rivers. And then firstly, you have your health and safety aspects. So you like, rivers are potentially dangerous places, and there's the potential to drown, and there's other things, slips, trips, and falls. So you have to be aware of that, and make sure that you're following all the health and safety procedures that your teachers that are being advised to you. And at the other side then is the biosecurity. We need to be careful, well, especially see, like I visit a lot of rivers, so I need to be sure that I'm not spreading things that I don't want to spread, like zebra mussels and things like that. So we have to make sure that our biosecurity is always is taken account of. So we need to check, clean, and dry our equipment so that we're not spreading things from one river to the next. So that's it from me. I hope you got something out of that. If you have any questions, there are my details. Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass you back.
That's brilliant, Gabriel. That was really interesting. It's kind of the good news, bad news thing, isn't it? That, the number of pristine rivers is decreasing, but then we don't have as many bad rivers. And it's a mixed bag, but I'm sure there's going to be plenty of questions. So if anyone does have any questions, just put them into the chat box, because we will get to them at the end of our session. I just wanted to take a moment to do a little student quiz. So all the students out there, pay attention, because we're going to have a little quiz, and your question is coming when I can figure it out. So our question is, and if you were listening to Gabriel's presentation, you might actually know the answer pretty quickly, but it is, are all Irish rivers pristine? So that means, are they all high status, which also means they're extremely healthy. We're going to have a poll, so I'm going to stop sharing now, but we have a poll up here so you can answer them. Is it, yeah, all of them are pristine? We're doing a great job. Is it B, no, only a small number are pristine, unfortunately? Or is it C, no, none of them are pristine? So we have some answers coming in. See, there's some questions in the chat box for you, Gabriel, if you wanted to look at them before the end of the presentations.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to have
So
some
a couple
questions.
more seconds just to respond. Are all Irish rivers pristine? I think there's been a good few responses now. You get 5 more seconds. Here we go. So I think everyone was listening very, very carefully, and all of the answers were correct. They all answered no, only a small number of rivers are pristine. So well done to everyone. That's great. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to pass over to Ruth from LAWPRO, because they have a very different perspective on water quality in terms of how they interact with the communities and schools. And Ruth is a community water officer with LAWPRO, so she's got lots of good information to share. Okay, Ruth, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Eileen. I'll just try to share my screen. Hopefully I don't have the same issues as Gabriel now. Let's see. Okay. Now, are you seeing my screen okay?
Yeah, all looks good.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
So my name is Ruth Gaj-McKeever. I work for the Local Authority Waters Programme. That's what LAWPRO stands for. And I'm based in Kildare County Council. So that's where I am most of the time. And I help cover Offaly and South Dublin County Council. But I'll talk a little bit about what LAWPRO is in a second. But just in case, if there's anything I say throughout this presentation, like a word you don't understand, tell your teachers and put it in the chat box, and we can help clarify that at the end, just so you understand what we're talking about, okay? So first of all, now this is probably my most technical slide, and I'm so happy that Gabriel has covered most of the, the tech stuff beforehand, all the big words and everything. So LAWPRO, the Local Authority Waters Programme. So we are a local authority, and that's like your local county council. So we're part of that. And we were started in 2016 to help meet those objectives that Gabriel was talking about for the Water Framework Directive. So that's a legal thing that Ireland has to meet to actually get good water quality by 2027. So LAWPRO was started to help make that happen. Okay, so that's kind of our main role, to make that happen. And we use something called a water action plan. Now, so you guys probably have an action plan if you have a Green Skills Committee in your school to actually tell you how you're going to do, all the fantastic things in your school. So that's what we have, an action plan for the country to tell us how we're going to do things and get the work done to get good water quality. So the EPA is listed in there loads of times, what they have to do. LAWPRO is listed in there. So loads of different organizations, okay? And that's my website as well. Not my website, LAWPRO's website, if you want to go on and get any of this information. And I'm sure the presentations will be shared afterwards, so don't worry about, and you have the video anyway. But you can click the links that I have in this afterwards when you get the presentation. So just on basic terms, who works in LAWPRO? I'm going to talk mostly about community water officers, which I am. But just to let you know a little bit more about what LAWPRO does. So we have different teams in LAWPRO. So there's a catchment science team that's a little bit like the EPA, where they go out and they're assessing water quality in areas that they call priority areas of action. So these are special areas that need particular attention. So we go out, so the catchment scientists go out and they do all those types of assessments that Gabriel mentioned, and then they report back any problems that they find to relevant stakeholders. So it might be like the county council, might be the EPA, and they share all those results as well. And they share it with them, Chagos, who work with farmers as well. Okay, so that's them. So they're a bit like you, like what you're going to be doing. I think, is it about 20 schools that are going to be going out and doing kick sampling. So I know Gabriel went through kind of the more detailed one that the catchment scientists would use, and they call that the Small Streams Impact Score. But you guys are going to be using a different system, and I'll talk about that, but it's really simple. So you guys are going to be identifying water quality and potential issues. So, and then we have a water EIP team, and these are a team that work with farmers. Okay, so they work with the Dairy Council and they work with Chagos, who work with farmers, and they're trying to help protect and restore water quality as well. So they work with farmers to give them funding to do things like put a fence up. I know you saw in Gabriel's photos where you saw the cattle getting into the river. Can you imagine what the cattle are doing in the river and why that might be an issue? They're not just standing there having a drink. They might be pooing and peeing in that river, and then that's in there. And then also you saw the banks were all eroded and there's sediment getting into the water, which isn't great for the animals that live in there. It can smother some of them that are filter feeders. So it's really important to help the farmers to put fences up and then to have like a solar powered trough. You can see it there in the picture. So that takes the water from the river and then the cattle can drink from that instead. So they work with them. We have a nature-based solutions team. So that's just basically they give advice to like the local authorities and to other organizations and community groups when they have the capacity, because there's only a very small team at the moment. And that's advice on using nature to help clean water before it goes into our rivers and into our ocean, and help prevent flooding, help make nice spaces. You can see those spaces look really nice. That kind of rain garden along the side of the road, they look really nice. And then they also help biodiversity as well. And then the best team in LAWPRO is the community waters team. So when issues are identified, that's where kind of we come into play, where we work with community groups to help carry out those actions to help solve those issues that you found. Okay, so that's what you guys do. When you find your problems, you want to think about what you're going to do to help solve it as well. So that's our main role, to work with communities. Okay. So identifying problems in your river, I want to ask you quickly, because like you might be getting all fidgety there, and just to see what you think. And I know Gabriel gave you loads of information. If you're out in a river, I know Aileen did too. If you're out in a river, maybe you can put it in your chat box there. Maybe the students can tell the teacher. If you're out in the river, how can you tell if your water is maybe clean or if it's polluted? What are the signs? What are the signs if it's a polluted river? Can anybody put it in the chat box? How would you tell? I know Gabriel went through loads of how you tell if the water was polluted or not. Does anyone have any suggestions? If you're out there looking at the river, how can you tell?
I can see a few comments already, Ruth.
Oh, right. Yeah.
People are talking about looking to see if there's rubbish in and
Yeah.
around the river, the smell,
Yeah.
maybe the color of the water.
Oh, wow. Oh my God. So
Yeah,
these guys have been listening and
they
obviously
have.
your training has helped. So yeah, just by looking out there, you can see the signs of pollution. So like you're saying, you can see the litter. You can see sort of those dirty water coming out of the pipes that Gabriel showed. You can see the banks eroded. That can tell you if there's pollution. Sometimes it might be shiny, the water, might have different colors. And not only that, sometimes it comes with a horrible smell. I've seen laundrettes and the water can be kind of, and it's not such a bad smell, but you can tell it's all, it's kind of a nice enough smell, but it's kind of frothy and kind of grey. So you can tell by the smell and the color. But then when you don't have any of those signs, how do you know? And that's where Gabriel's information came into play, where you're looking at the chemicals, or you're doing chemical testings, which I know you guys are doing, the nitrates and phosphates, and that tells you if there's like poo in the water. That tells you if there's too much nutrients, and then, but you have to be at the river at that time to actually. Maybe there's been loads of pollution, but you weren't there at the right time. You didn't get those chemical testing results. But the life in the river, while there are just some disadvantages that Gabriel mentioned, they'll know if there's been ongoing pollution. If it's been continuous, there's going to be an issue with the life that's living. It's like somebody wrecking your house, like, or taking all your food and water away. You're not going to be happy, and there are signs for that. So I'm just going to go over some tips. Hopefully, why is this not moving? Oh, there we go. Um, yeah, so the method you guys are using to actually investigate the life that's in the river to tell you if it's dirty or clean or not, and then what actions you can take is called the Citizen Science Stream Index. Now, I know you guys probably already know this. I know Eileen showed you a video, so I'm not going to go into the massive amount of detail. I'm just going to give you a few tips around it. But basically, you're looking at three species. Now, we call them the good guys, as Gabriel said. They're not necessarily they're not good in any way. Like, they just show that it's good water quality, okay, that it's healthy rivers. So these three good guys, the stonefly, you can see it's got two tails. I know Gabriel had fantastic photos. And the flattened mayfly looks like it looks like it's been squashed really. And it has three tails. And the green caddisfly, which is actually quite green and it's like a little caterpillar. And these are all the stages of flies, like a caterpillar before it becomes a butterfly. These are all going to become flies. So they live in the water. And then you've got the three bad guys, the leeches, the snails, and the water lice, which look a little bit like the wood lice and that you'd see around wood. So when you're calculating it, I'm not going into a lot of detail, but just to remind you, you're adding a +1. You don't count every single stonefly you see. You just put a +1 in if you see one, and then you put a -1 in if you see a bad guy. So if you had three good guys, it'd be 3 because you put 1, 1, and 1. And if you had three bad guys, it'd be -3. When you put them together, it's 0, and you've moderately polluted. Okay, so that's what, and a community water officer can help you with this as well if they have availability. And I'll talk about our supports now in a second. So that's just the CSSI in a nutshell, but you guys know a lot more about that and you've seen the video. But if you're choosing a site to actually get out there and have a look, now how are you going to do that? That's an important thing. Um, I know Gabriel's saying a lot of people use EPA data. We do. I go on to the EPA maps and I have that little barcode, that little code there. You can screenshot it and you can get onto it. You can bring it to this maps where there's loads of data about the rivers that near you. You need first know what rivers are beside you. There could be one that you don't know about. Okay, so you go on to there. That's what you see initially. And I picked Maynooth as an example. You can see all the rivers going in around Maynooth, and you'd be like, okay, well, maybe I'll have a look at one of those rivers. So how am I going to pinpoint it even more? Well, actually, I'm going to look to see if any of them is really special, protected. Maybe I need to look at the water going in there. So I put in protected areas, and actually there's one that's a special area of conservation. So that's protected for special habitats and species. So I'd want to look at the water going in there really well. And then I went and looked at what's the water quality like. And this area, unfortunately, has poor water quality. And this is all going into that special area. So I really want to be looking at these rivers. The Q value now, Gabriel already mentioned that. That's the number that you give to the score you get when you count up all your bugs that you see. So you can see there's one red, so that's bad. So I want to look right before, you can see where my little cross is there. I want to look right before here because it's bad, but then it somehow becomes purr here. So I'm like, oh, there's something going on up here. I want to have a look. So that'll help pinpoint where you go. You can, oh yeah, Gabriel showed you loads of these, so I'm not going to mention it. And then you can look at pressures. So those things that are actually impacting the river that was spoken about earlier, you can actually tick that and you can see what's there. And you can see here for Maynooth, it's agriculture. So there's agriculture issues and urban runoffs. That's water from like surface water running into the drains and going straight into the river. And then sometimes where there's no information is a good place to look, because 75% of river systems are small rivers. And often like there's only enough, there's not that many people in the EPA to go around and look at all those, or LAWPRO. So they're good points to look at as well. So choosing a site, so you have your river, you want to go out, but you have to go walk it just to check. So you need to do a bit of a recce and go out and have a look at it. So you want to be looking for safe points to go in. So you don't want steep banks. You want to be looking for shallow water. So it should be below your knees. So you're not going into very deep water. So you shouldn't be, and obviously you're taking those precautions that were spoken about earlier. Low energy, so you're not doing it near a weir or anything like that. Mix of habitats, you can see here, they call it riffle. I always want to think ripple. So where you see the ripples in the water and it's kind of white, they're good places to do it because they're kind of stony and they have a lot of bugs in there. And then the pools as well, but you'd go into the shallow parts of the pools. Gravelly bits are best for the species. And actually looking, if you see a pollution point when you're out there, so like in Maynooth, if I was out at that spot and I saw a few pipes, I might actually sample before that pollution point and then afterwards and see if there was a difference. And that'll really tell you if it's that's causing the problem. Okay, and you can do an outfall safari. Actually, I have the link there if you want to investigate these points. So, and Aileen, stop me if I'm going over. I'm making sure I'm trying to stay in the 10 minutes, but and carrying out a kick test, and I'll go through this just really quickly. So you found your spot, you're going to get into the river. What do you do? Okay, well, giving everyone a job is an important thing. So making sure somebody has the sheet so they're doing all, they're writing down like what they see. Somebody has the ID key. Maybe two people are helping with the kick test. So make sure everyone has a job. And like it was mentioned earlier, that you're making sure that you've checked all your kit, that you're not carrying any little animals or plants that don't belong in the river in there that will actually cause harm to the species living there. So you're checking your kit, making sure there's no muck on it or bits of plants, you're cleaning it, do this in advance. Now you can use Milton that you would use for bottles to clean it, and then you're drying it for 2 days. And this is an example of one of the plants, Himalayan balsam. You can see how massive it gets, okay? And then no native species can grow along a riverbank when they're there. So you don't want to be spreading stuff like that when you go from river to river, or even upstream to downstream. You don't want to be helping that, or downstream to upstream. You just want to be careful. Okay. When you're in there, you can use the net when you're getting in and out. So you can use don't use the net part, but the other end as like a stick to help you walk so you're not going to fall over, and hold the net away from you so you're not kicking loads of stones into it. So just a little bit further away from you. You're walking slowly upstream when you're kick testing. So you're kind of walking backwards up the stream, but you want to make sure where you're stepping is safe. So just keep an eye out on that. And when you get your sample, you want to remove the big stones and the leaves, but you have to wash them first because there's things on there. Those creatures love to sit on the leaves, and especially the green caddisflies. They're devils for hiding in the plants. You want to wash all of them, make sure they're out, and then put them back, okay? But I do leave a few big stones in there because they tend to gather on it, and I find that it's a good spot then to go look for them because they're hanging around the stone. And you let the content settle so you can see what's there. You only count things once. You only need to see one leech. Don't count thousands of them. You only count it once for this, and taking photos is really important to show what you identified as actually it is correct. Like you can see, this is a very clear picture here. 2 tails, that's a stonefly. That's a squash looking flattened mayfly with 3 tails, and that's a green caddisfly. So you want good pictures. And this is important then for your reporting as well. So after you kind of calculate and you've found, okay, maybe I have bad water, maybe I have good water, but there's always an action you can do for it. So this is where you kind of think about, well, what am I going to do? So you could do a litter pick, 2-minute street clean. So I know that's an action, and LAWPRO can link in with that. You can report a sighting of an invasive species. So you don't go around pulling things up or doing anything, but you can report it to invasives.ie. And there's a link to it on this presentation. And then the EPA has the See It, Say It app where you can get on there. If you see pollution, you can report it on there and that'll go to the EPA or the local authority to deal with it. So how can LAWPRO community water officers support schools? Now, we are really busy, and but we do want to work with schools. So you just have to reach out to your local community water officer. I'll tell you later where you get the information. And there's certain things that we can help with. Okay, so you can see in some of the pictures what we're getting involved with. We can help provide information. We can help you find out. We can help you use those maps to help understand what rivers you could go to. You could link with a local community group. So we work with community groups and give funding to them. So we can help you link in with them and maybe you can get funding through them. We can assist with the CSSIs. That's the Citizen Science Stream Index I just talked about that some of you are doing on this. We can do school visits. So I think that's me out with the school there. You can see it's very shallow water. Like, there's not a huge risk. I know people are often worried, like there is a risk, but you need to pick safe points. And you can see that it can be quite okay to go out with the classroom. And it's important to get out there and see it in person. Like the kids absolutely love it. And then you can see we do school visits there. That's Justin having bring some materials, the kick sampling into the school to have a look. We can do talks there as well. And then the work that you do on this, if you're on the Green Skills Water team, you can actually use it to help with the recommended actions for green schools. So like they ask you to check out the water quality in your area. Tick, you've done that with this. They ask you to research an aquatic species. Tick, you've done it with this. Okay, so it'll help meet that. And we can help with action days as well. But you do need to link in with your community water officer and see their availability. And I'm not going to talk about this. I just wanted to show you these are the different types of community actions that LAWPRO carries out. So BAT Talks is a big one that community groups love, and if schools are interested, now some schools actually do want to host this sort of thing. We can help fund that through a community group, cleanups, little biodiversity festivals. So there's loads of stuff that we get up to. You can just link in with the community water officer. If you want to find more information on what projects are happening in your area, we have information on our website and you can zoom in on it. So there's NACE there, Salance, you can see there. They were doing some citizen science stuff. You could link in with them if you were interested. You can find out about it. And these are all the projects that are funded this year. So we gave over $1 million to community groups this year to help them carry out actions to protect and restore water quality. And you can find out their details there. This one in Ballymore is Eustace is doing a Himalayan balsam removal. So that's all of us. This is constantly changing, but that's who we are and where we're based at the moment. And you can get our details there. That's mine. So hopefully I didn't go too much over, Aileen.
I know. As soon as we all start talking about rivers, we are very enthusiastic, so it's hard to stop. But no, this is brilliant advice, and I'm sure the teachers and students are very grateful to have your tips and your knowledge shared today. And we will pass on both your presentation and Gabriel's presentation too. I just want to do a really quick student quiz. So I know there's questions lined up already, but I just wanted to do one more quick quiz. And now mine's doing I'm going to just leave it in this mode right now because I cannot, I don't have the time. Okay, question. Why are your observations important? So you're going to be going out to the rivers over the next few weeks and next month or so, or that rough time frame, maybe after Easter. But why are your observations important? Is it because A, it helps everyone understand the health of our rivers in Ireland? Is it B, because NASA scientists can use some of the data submitted to GLOBE? Is it C, because you can drive change? So like Ruth was saying, you can actually make things happen. Or is it D, all of the above? So there are the questions. So just give you just a minute there to answer. So why are your observations important? So this is for the students and teachers that are going out to the rivers through March, April. Why are they important? So I see lots of answers coming in. And just give you 10 more seconds to answer. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and show the results. We'll end the poll. And all of you answered correctly. Again, it's all of the above. So your observations are important for many different reasons. We share the results with the EPA. Hopefully some of the data will be shared with LAWPRO as well. And Dublin City University are interested in your observations as well. Anyone that submits data to the GLOBE database, NASA scientists use that data, so it's brilliant. And we've seen again and again through this campaign, and this is the teachers and the students, that they are making changes. So it's fantastic to see. So all of the above is correct. Okay, we have just under 10 minutes, and I just wanted to give an opportunity for people to ask questions. So I know we have some questions in the chat box already. So just let me see if we can spotlight Gabriel and Ruth. And then I'm going to just go back and make sure I can find the first question. Okay, so there is a question from a primary school, and they're wondering how many rivers are drying up annually. So do you have rivers that are completely drying up?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have, you see, it's hard to say because some rivers dry up naturally in that they're groundwater fed. So like in wintertime, they're full of water, but then as soon as kind of you get less rain, that water kind of stays in the ground and it doesn't appear in the rivers as much. So they're dried up at that stage. It's something that probably needs more study, especially with climate change. It's something that we're going to have to look at going forward, I think. But there is like I was saying, we use the invertebrates to monitor the effects of pollution, so nutrient pollution. But there's other invertebrates are also used to look at how like changes to flow and how like reduced flow and is impacting on the vertebrates. So, you know, it's I suppose a bigger issue in kind of drier countries, like even in England, it's a bigger issue. It maybe not so much in Ireland at the moment, but you know, going forward, it's definitely potentially something with climate change. You know, it's something that we're going to have to spend more time looking at, I think. So, in answer to the question, it's hard to say exactly. You know, some dry up naturally. Yeah. So hopefully
Yeah,
that
no, that's
answers.
interesting. I suppose we have to think about how much water we take out for our own uses as well, don't we?
Yeah.
And not to
Yeah.
take too much out. Yeah, that is very interesting. And I have another question here, and I'm not sure which school it is, but it's from Mairead Hogan as a teacher. And they're wondering, is the otter population in Ireland affected by pollution at all? I know we actually saw an otter on one of our teacher training sessions in Dublin, in a river in Dublin. So yeah, that's a really good question. Are they affected by pollution?
Well, again, I might. You see, pollution. Otters are like an apex predator. You know, they're the top of the food chain. So if you got impacts to invertebrates, the fish feed on the invertebrates, the otters feed on the fish. So you know, if you've got pollution, you're going to have less invertebrates there, so there's going to be less food for the fish, and then you're going to have less fish as well because potentially the oxygen levels are not going to be sufficient for the fish to survive. And if there's not enough fish there, that's going to impact on the otters. So you're going to get decreased otter population. So yeah, they're going to be affected by pollution. And also it's just think like otters they like swimming in clean water. You know, they don't like swimming in dirty water, you know, polluted water. So yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's, I suppose, for the students in secondary schools, they'll be learning about food chains and everything. So it's kind of important to think about that, not just that individual organism, but the whole chain of events. It's same for humans, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
like when we're, yeah. But that is a great question. So there is another question from De La Salle College, and that is, are there any organisms in the water that can potentially kill another species? So it's quite a broad question in some ways. For some reason, I just think of freshwater shrimp because they always look like they're killing each other in the water whenever I do any
Yeah,
sample.
that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like yeah, they're like beetles, you know, they're and diving beetles, you know, they're notorious predators, so they feed off other, you know, so a lot of the organisms in the water, they do feed off other organisms, so they are like essentially killing other, but that's to survive. Um, then in a kind of another roundabout way, you've got like invasive species that potentially they use up they develop so quickly and they're so fast growing that they use up all the food and sources of food, you know, that other organisms might have used up. So in a roundabout way, they do kill off other organisms as well. And then maybe another, maybe not such a great example, but if you get toxic algae, you know, that's just the potential to kill dogs. You know, if they go drinking water from like a polluted lake, you know, that's the potential to kill um, organism. And actually, like a lot of the water that we use, like our drinking water, it's taken from lakes. And So like, well, the EPA is responsible as well for that side, in terms of monitoring the water quality, the drinking water quality, but they have to make sure that there's no bad kind of pollutants, like E. coli and stuff like that, that might cause health problems for humans in the water quality. So again, like, all these things, they're all kind of interrelated.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
No, they're really good points because obviously, the groups going out to the rivers now, they won't be looking at all the pollutants, or they're just looking at a small set. So it's kind of hard to understand then, I suppose, all the different aspects. And I'm just thinking from a safety perspective as well. I think that's probably why we send the gloves and we recommend hand sanitizer, just because you mentioned E. coli there. And I was just thinking about that. So it is good, we don't know in advance whether a river is healthy and clean.
yeah.
That's why you're there. So it's probably good to assume it's not that clean and just, make those steps to make you safe. I like the next question too, because it's one of these things that we throw around this word all the time, but it's totally confusing about exactly what that means. What is hydromorphology?
Yeah, that's another great question. A lot of great questions. Hydromorphology, I suppose, in this respect, it kind of refers to the flow of water, like in a river. So it's kind of looking at how that flow might be affected. Um, so like naturally, you should have a nice kind of soft bankside, but in kind of some rivers where humans have been involved in it, they might have put in hard bank structures like concrete structures, and that's maybe to make it to make the rivers usable for shipping lanes or something, for boats. Sorry, not shipping lanes. So I suppose hydromorphology kind of refers to the flow of water in a river, and really you want it to be as natural as possible. So if you've got things like weirs, that's going to affect the flow. If you've got things like dredging going on, that's going to make the channel a lot deeper, and so it's going to slow down the flow.
Mhm.
And really, like when we're looking at it, we want it to be as natural as possible. So we're comparing, like the rivers that we sample. We've kind of got an idea what they should be like, pristine rivers, and we're comparing them against that idea, in
Mm.
terms of how natural they are. Um, so
And Ruth, do any of the community groups, do they work on like weirs or removing any man-made objects in the river at all, or are they more focused on other aspects of
Yeah,
rivers?
well, no, there's a variety of stuff, but yes, they do get involved in the removal of weirs, but they do that in coordination with Inland Fisheries Ireland and the local authorities. But yeah, is it the Ballinglen one in Wicklow that they removed a weir recently. So often community groups can access funding, like especially from LAWPRO, they can get funding for actions like this, and then it can be co-funded with a local authority. But you can
Mm.
actually get there's maybe it can be shared on afterwards. There's a portal like that map viewer that I was showing you, where you can see all the different barriers on your river and how that might be impacting it and the shape of the river. So yeah, that'd be a good one to
Mm.
check the impact it's having. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes, like when you say, like, oh yeah, you're going to compare it to a natural river, a lot of us are in towns and built up areas, and sometimes all we're used to seeing is rivers that have been modified in some way. So it's a little tricky sometimes, isn't it? Because then you're thinking to yourself, what is a natural river if you're not used to looking at it, in its natural state?
Yeah.
Um, I have another good question here. What are the most polluted and the least polluted rivers in Ireland? Do you know that off the top of your head? Like, is there a couple of rivers that you're like, wow, that is heavily polluted, and vice versa then for the pristine?
yeah, well, we have a good idea. Like we know that it's really to do with like human activities, I think. So we know like rivers that are kind of up in mountainy areas where there's not so much human activity going on, they're going to be really pristine.
Yeah.
And but it's the rivers then closer to towns and downstream, that are kind of surrounded by maybe agriculture and forestry, they're going to be more impacted. And if there's going to be like if you've got a big town, you've probably got a sewage treatment plant that's taking all all the the toilet kind of stuff from people's homes, and that's treating all that, and that's going to be going into a river somewhere. So we know that that's potentially going to be impacted by what's going in from the sewage treatment plant. So
Mm.
really, the best ones are probably like the west of Ireland, where you don't have as much human activity. The farming and agricultural practices are not going to be as intensive. So you might maybe just have limited sheep, as opposed to big uh, dairy farms or something like that, operating near them. And so the west of Ireland and like up in the mountain areas, Donegal, Kerry as well, you've got really beautiful rivers. And then the most affected are probably the southeast and closer to cities and closer to where agriculture is more intensive.
Yeah. We always, when we run this campaign, we do have schools from, I think we have, oh, off the top of my head, maybe 20 different counties, but we're always quite jealous of, I think there was a school last year took part from Westport area, and they had a lovely river there, and they even found a freshwater pearl mussel.
Yeah, yeah.
So thought that was a great sign of things over there.
But it's great as well when you see it like in impacted areas that they have a good river system, good quality river, because that's an indication that they've got good management there and they're able to, bring in procedures that are able to bring up the quality. So that's keep an eye out for those rivers as well. They're probably even especially important,
Definitely. I'm conscious that we're gone over time a tiny bit, but I just wanted to ask one more question. I'm just looking to see if there's a different school. Yeah, so one question here is, what is the most common pollutant in our streams and rivers? Is there one that just stands out more than all the others? And that's from Milford National School. That could be a Donegal school, actually. Not sure. But yeah, so that's the...
Yeah, so for rivers, like phosphorus is the big nutrient, because there's not a lot of phosphorus in the rivers. So when it gets it, the plants really start growing because it's limited in the rivers normally, naturally. So once it gets it, the plants really start growing, and then that has the impact on the when the plants start breaking down, it uses up the oxygen, and that's like the impact on the invertebrates. But the problem with monitoring phosphorus, it's hard to monitor it. Like if you go there one day, you might be able to just spot it, but if you go 2 days later, there's no sign of it. But it's the impact has kind of been done. So that's why we use invertebrates, because they give you a more holistic view of what's impacting on the river. It's over a longer term period. So yeah, phosphorus, and I suppose dissolved oxygen as well, because well, it depends where the location of the treatment or the river is. If it's near a treatment plant and you've got effluents going in, that's really low in dissolved oxygen, and that's going to pull all the oxygen out as well. But no, phosphorus is the main thing.
Right. It's interesting. And, just in terms of a few final words, like they'll all be going out there now over the next few weeks, like I said, and they are measuring nutrients and they are making all these observations and everything. Have you any kind of words just of like either encouragement or even just like, just remember to do this thing? Or is there anything kind of final advice, I guess, you'd have for the schools around visiting rivers? I'll go to Ruth first, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, I suppose my whole presentation was tips and advice. But as I'd look at my presentation again. No, but getting out there, I think, is really important. I know schools, it can be tricky to get out there, and teachers often have to take the sample and bring it back to the school, and I can understand that. But I think it's really important for the students to get out and see the river and see what's happening, and kind of it brings the whole thing home, because seeing it and just randomly in a classroom, it kind of loses context. So I think if you can get out, that'd be my tip. Yeah.
And Gabriel?
My tip, just get out there as well. Enjoy it. It's your natural world. It's great to be part of it. And the thing about rivers and lakes is that if you look at the whole kind of cycle, you've got like the sea, and the water evaporates out of the sea and then rises up and it hits mountains, and then it flows down, back out to the sea, down to rivers and down through lakes. So just think about that process. You've got then the insects and the fish that have adapted to that process, and they've developed like over millions of years to live it, as part of that process. So it's fascinating. And then it should be ideally you want everything pristine. You want like a high status, and you want to see freshwater pearl mussels everywhere, and you want to see like big stoneflies. But unfortunately, we're not seeing that. But the more people get involved, we might be able to bring that back. So yeah, enjoy it, I think, is the message, and be safe. That's the other.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like, and I suppose we're always thinking as well, like going to the rivers, it's great because like everyone can have a task there. And I think Ruth had mentioned that too. Like there's going to be someone in the group that just loves to sketch and they're, you know, they can draw the river perfectly. And there's other people that are more interested in hands-on and want to get that water sample and or want to get in there and have a look at the macroinvertebrates and everything. So I think there is a job for everyone. And then if you can zoom out and think about the big picture and the water cycle and then your whole catchment area, that's even better. So I just want to say, like, absolutely huge congratulations. No, congratulations. Like, well done to Ruth. Sorry, I got distracted there. And Gabriel, because I saw a really nice message I'm going to read out. So huge thanks for joining us today. I just wanted to say, actually, there is a school in Wicklow and they're all drawing pictures based on what they've heard this morning, which is really nice because this is open for all primary schools and secondary schools. So really nice to hear that. So thank you so much for joining us, Ruth and Gabriel. And thank you to all the teachers for taking the time to tune in. And I really hope that you got something from today. If you have any questions, you can follow up with me. I can pass questions on to Ruth. I can pass questions on to Gabriel. We'll be sharing the presentations afterwards. And yeah, no, absolutely fantastic. And well done, everyone. And we'll be in touch with some schools. We have a few prizes based on the questions that were asked today. So we have a few prizes and we'll be in touch about that.
Thanks,
okay,
guys.
thank you, everyone.